I'm going year by year, starting in 1930, picking out some of the most celebrated films of that year and watching them. Over the last few weeks, I've watched 19 movies that were released in 1930. Here's how they ranked for me. Number 19. Earth. Earth is a film from director Alexander Dovzhenko. I apologize for the pronunciation. Let me just preemptively apologize for anything I'm about to say. Anything I'm about to say. Any name that I pronounce throughout this entire video, and for the rest of my life. It tells the story of Ukrainian peasants caught in the midst of collectivization, highlighting their struggles, connections to nature, and the impact of industrialization on rural life. This is considered one of the greatest films ever made, so why am I ranking it so low? Well, something has to be last, and these kinds of movies just really don't do it for me. Tarkovsky, Malick, tone poem kind of films. There's a lot of beautiful imagery, but ultimately it feels more like an abstract history lesson than an engaging movie. It's interesting, and since watching it, I've learned a little bit more about the history and context in which the film was made, which maybe I should consider doing before I watch the film, which has made me appreciate it more, but still. Number 18, Madame Satan. What a insane movie. It's a romance, it's a musical, it's a disaster film, it's directed by Cecil B. DeMille, and it tells the story of Angela Brooks trying to win back the affection of her philandering husband. The front half of the film plays out like a standard screwball sex comedy with mistaken identities and chaotic scrambling.
This isn't a boast, it's a complaint.
Say, you worm, get out of my room.
I wouldn't marry you to keep warm on an iceberg, but we've got to pretend.
But none of the character motivations make any sense. They're only doing what the film needs them to do and not what any human being on Earth would do. So it ends up being a comfortable rhythm that is vaguely entertaining and might make you smile if you don't stop to think about what's actually going on for even a second. Then it devolves into a Hindenburg-level disaster at a masquerade ball on a blimp. It's strange. It's very strange. The songs aren't great, and that's why it's number 18. Number 17, Abraham Lincoln. I'm in the middle of Slow Fade to Black. It's really more like the front half, which talks a bit about D.W. Griffith post Birth of a Nation. And it seems like throughout the rest of his filmography after that, there's always a movie that pops up and says, see, I'm not a racist. I was actually surprised at how much I like this one. It's Griffith's first sound film, and it feels firmly rooted in the silent era, from the sets to the cinematography. This feels like a throwback, even for 1930, but I like a good throwback. Walter Houston gives a nice performance as Honest Abe. Yeah, this should probably be last on the list, but it's too late, the list has been made. 16, Hog Wild. I feel like there's some kind of strange rivalry between fans of 30s comedy teams. I'm firmly in the camp of the Marx Brothers. I've never liked much of what I've seen of the Three Stooges, and I'm completely ignorant of Laurel and Hardy, who star in this short. And this short is good and funny. I'm not sure if this was a good place to start with Laurel and Hardy. If you have any recommendations, throw them in the comments of where to begin, because I'm interested in diving in more. But this short did not rise to the level of the Marx Brothers for me. 15, Apropos Denise. Apropos Denise. Apropos Denise? It's apropos Denise. Look, I'm not ranking the most influential films of all time. If I were, this would probably rank near the top of the list. This is ranked based on my enjoyment of the film, and just like Earth, I find this more interesting than enjoyable. Not that things can't be interesting and enjoyable, but my bias is definitely towards plot and dialogue. Anyway, Apropos Denise is directed by Jean Vigo, again, apologies about name pronunciations, and takes a satirical look at the differences between the wealthy tourists and working class locals of Nice, and it does that really well. Really fantastic, interesting editing that is a great thing to study, but I'd rather watch these next 14 movies. 14, L'Âge d'Or. L'Âge d'Or? L'Âge d'Or. L'Âge d'Or. I feel so dumb. I think the French invented their language just so that Americans feel dumb speaking it. L'Âge d'Or is a surrealist satire from director Luis Buñuel and co-writer Salvador Dali. It tells the story of a man and woman who just want to get it on but are constantly thwarted by the bourgeois and religion. Been there. But what it's really about, it's an indictment of bourgeois society and the oppression of sexuality, human desires, and the hypocrisy of the church. And I think this is a good example of why, for the most part, these more abstract films don't work for me. I shouldn't say that they don't work for me, because they do. I do enjoy them and appreciate them, but they're just not my favorites. A lot of the moments in this film are really effective and affecting. The scene where the young boy is shot and killed for a benign prank and the wealthy people look down and shrug it off. The final scene with Jesus leaving the castle from 120 Days of Sodom. They're great moments that challenge you and make you think about the film, but they're disconnected from any kind of emotional arc, and so I end up enjoying reading about the film after the fact more than I do actually watching the film. 13, People on Sunday. I made a full video about this one. You can watch watch that here, but this is a documentary style film about four 20-somethings having a fun day out in 1930s Berlin. I find it deeply sad, even though that's not what the film is about, the context in which the film sits in history with what happened to Germany in the coming decade. Watching it evokes some kind of weird, sad nostalgia feeling in me. Is there a word for that? Leave it in the comments. Number 12, Morocco, directed by Joseph von Sternberg and starring Marlene Dietrich. This film tells the story of a French legionnaire played by Gary Cooper and a cabaret singer played by Dietrich, who despite their mysterious and possibly troubled pasts, fall in love. This movie is only this low on the list because of Gary Cooper.
Thanks for the flower, mademoiselle.
I think he's a goofball in this movie. I do not buy that Marlene Dietrich, who owns every room she walks into, everyone's attention that she comes in contact with, I don't believe that that woman is falling for this dopey kid and giving up everything to, spoiler, follow him out into the desert. You'll never hear this complaint from me again, but I also think it's too short to really sell the epicness that is somewhere in there. Number 11, Monte Carlo. Just a fun, lighthearted operetta. Would you call this an operetta? Directed by Ernst Lubitsch and starring Jeanette MacDonald, Jack Buchanan, and Claude Allister. I love the performances. I love the songs. In my full video on this one, I called it an empty calorie because it doesn't leave much of a mark, but I had a great time sitting down and watching this one. From the few Lubitsch films I've seen, he's definitely becoming one of my all-time favorite directors. Now we're getting to the top 10. I have done full videos on all of these except one, so if you want to hear me elaborate, go check those out on the channel. Starting with number 10, City Girl, directed by F.W. Murnau. City Girl is the story of a young wheat farmer who falls in love with a city girl. They immediately get married, and when he brings her back to the farm, his dad is not happy about it. The front half of this film is beautifully shot and funny. The second half dips pretty heavily into melodrama and problems that can be solved with literally a 10-second conversation, which just doesn't do it for me, but the whole film is worth it just for those first 60 minutes. Number 9, That Night's Wife, a silent film from Yasujiro. A silent film. I can't say film. I'm going to say Yasujiro. A silent film from Yasujiro Ozu, That Night's Wife, starts out as a noir thriller as we are dropped into the middle of a bank robbery. It quickly pivots to a tense family drama about a father and mother who will do anything to save their young child. This is a tight 65-minute film that packs a real punch. I'm not going to say much about it, just go watch it. I still have no idea why it's called That Night's Wife, though. Number 8, Under the Roofs of Paris. Under the Roofs of Paris is the 1930 film from writer-director René Clair. It focuses on Albert, a street singer who becomes infatuated with Paula, the girlfriend of a local thug, Fred. This opens and closes with a beautiful crane shot over the roofs of Paris. The love triangle doesn't work, and especially if you look at it from a contemporary point of view, but the filmmaking really carried me through. And now I'm talking about it right here, where I'm feeling like it's probably ranked too high. Is this really better than Morocco? This also might be in the wrong spot. Moving on. Number 7, Murder. Murder, the earliest Hitchcock film I've ever seen. I love murder mystery. Hitchcock's ability to craft high suspense is already fully formed and will only get better over the course of his career, but not only is it suspenseful, the film is funny, and that's where it really shines for me. The scene where the detectives are trying to interview the actors backstage during a performance, and really any scene with Sir John, Ted, and Ducey, their dynamic is great. Probably not one of Hitchcock's best films, but right now it stands out as one of my favorites. Number 6, Hell's Angels, directed by Howard Hughes, eventually, kind of. The production of this film might be more well-known than the film itself, but it's a story of two brothers, Roy and Monty, who are both in love with Jean Harlow and also fighting in World War I. There's a scene that is one of the first uses of color. The dogfights are great, not as good as William Wellman's Wings, just saying. And the film has a really great ending, which I won't spoil here. There's lots to complain about this film, especially with the love triangle that really goes nowhere, but ultimately, I really enjoyed it. Number 5, West Front, 1918. This might have been my biggest surprise of all the films I watched from 1930. Everyone always talks about All Quiet on the Western Front, but nobody's talking about West Front, 1918. A German film made about German soldiers during World War I, and I think it deserves to be sitting right up there beside All Quiet on the Western Front as one of the greatest anti-war films of all time. The film really shines when one of the soldiers, Carl, goes home and sees the toll the war has taken on everyone in his hometown, including his wife and mother. I said it in my full video, but All Quiet on the Western Front says, look what we did to these boys, while West Front says, look what we did to the people of this country. If you're a fan of classic war films, you have to see this one. Number 4, The Big House. It's the big house, see? This was another, this is ridiculous. This was another pleasant surprise for me. It's a story of essentially 3 prisoners and their life within the prison system. That's a really bad way to describe it because there's so much more that happens in this film. There's betrayal and escapes and a huge riot, and in some respects it can border on caricature, but for most of its running time, this is a really thoughtful film about prison conditions in 1930 with rich, complicated characters. And all 3 of our leads, Chester Morris, Wallace Beery, and Robert Montgomery, are fantastic. Number 3, All Quiet on the Western Front. Western Front 1918 is a fantastic film. But All Quiet on the Western Front, it earns its reputation. Go watch my video if you want more in-depth thoughts about it, but Lewis Milestone really captured the book perfectly. But number 3? What are your top 2, Chris? Number 2, The Blue Angel. Yes, we have Sternberg and Dietrich twice on this list. I loved this film, and my love for it only grew the more I sat with it. Emil Jannings gives a big but terrific performance as Professor Emanuel Roth, who, after tracking down some students to a seedy nightclub, becomes infatuated with Dietrich's Lola Lola. On my first watch, I thought this was a regressive film about an evil woman corrupting a respectable man, but it's not. This is about a man's self-destruction due to his own ego and hubris, and depravity feels too strong of a word, so we'll call it lust. Perfectly paced with some beautiful German expressionist sets and lighting. Like I said, Jannings is great, Dietrich is perfect as usual. Go watch this film. But my number 1 film from 1930 is Animal Crackers. I know if you've made it this far, you're saying, Animal Crackers? The number 1 film of 1930, better than All Quiet on the Western Front? I'm sorry. I love the Marx Brothers, and this is my favorite of their films. Every interaction between Groucho and Chico in this film is perfect. I rented this film from A to Z Video on VHS when I was a kid, and I transcribed Groucho's scene with Margaret Dumont and Margaret Irving so I could reenact it in my room. I made this in my 7th grade art class. Watching the Marx Brothers go wild is cinema, and I won't apologize for it. Next week, I'm going to be ranking the films produced by Val Lewton, so if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And that's it. Get ready for 1931, where the first film I'm going to be talking about is Fritz Lang's M.